Good morning, everyone. It looks like we just have a few people still logging in, so we'll just give them another minute or two and then we'll get started. Okay, I think we're ready to go. So I'm Sarah Ray, Corporate Wellbeing Consultant from Welsh Duffield, and I thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, How to Manage Mental Wellbeing Through Crisis, presented by Marie Story from Welsh Duffield. Today's webinar is being hosted by the Group Benefits team at Welsh Duffield, and we're so happy that everyone was able to join us remotely today. We normally would have seen you all last week at our in-person annual benefits seminar, but of course this year, in order to keep our team and all of you safe and well, we're doing this virtually instead. So while we all hope to be back together next year in 2021, we're so happy that we're still able to share some of the great presentations that we had lined up in this webinar format. So before I introduce today's speaker, I'd like to cover just a few housekeeping items. So today's webinar is being recorded, and we'll be able to share a link with you after the event is complete. And we welcome you to revisit this content yourself, as well as share it with any of your colleagues. Today's slides will also be available to share with you if you're interested in those as well. We invite your comments and questions throughout. We just ask that you please use the Q&A box on your screen. If you think of a question at any point throughout the presentation, you can just type it in that box, and then we'll hold it for the discussion portion at the end of the event. And with that, I'm happy to introduce today's presenter, Marie Story. Marie has been part of the Welsh Duffield Wellness team since 2013. Currently, she provides corporate well-being consulting to clients of Welsh Duffield and the Western New York community. As team leader, her goal is to help local organizations develop effective wellness programs to keep employees safe and well. Marie graduated from Ithaca College with a master's in health promotion and education. In addition, she's a certified health education specialist and an ACE certified health coach. So at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Marie, who can start today's presentation. So Marie, it's all yours.
All right. Good morning, and thank you for the introduction, Sarah. In our roles as corporate well-being consultants, we know that employee well-being is a critical component to your organization's success. And today we want to discuss and focus on mental well-being in particular. In this ever-changing landscape of COVID-19, mental and emotional health are just as critical to address as the safety and physical health measures we're following to prevent the spread of disease. And one of the key takeaways I hope you have today is that all individuals deal with the current pandemic in a different way. And it's important, as someone who's likely in a leadership role, to be able to identify when you see an employee in need and how to even help yourself through this current crisis. We know anxiety, worry, and stress can be just as contagious as COVID-19 itself. In this moment, it's critical to support employees' mental and emotional well-being. Today's objectives are to understand the concerns around the current coronavirus pandemic as it pertains to mental health of your employees, some proactive steps you can take as a leader to help yourself and your employees, and then self-care strategies to build resilience that you can practice and then take to your employees and workforce as well. So understanding the concerns, the global coronavirus pandemic has certainly impacted not just our physical health, but of course, our mental health. And some of the concerns that are most prevalent are there's a lot of anxiety about the spread of the virus. And although in New York State, we're entering phase 4, which is a really great sign, I think we've heard at a national level, there's still a lot of concern about the spread of the virus. And we know that there could even be a second wave. So for a lot of individuals, this causes extreme stress and worry. Of course, we're worried about the health of ourselves, our loved ones. I think what worries us a lot about coronavirus is that we still know there are individuals who are high risk, but there are individuals who seem low risk, but still seem to have a lot of signs and symptoms when they contract the virus. And that can be really concerning. Some of us might be worrying about our children or our parents or our grandparents. And this can be really constant and prevalent and impact our mental health. We might also be feeling uncertain about our finances. Many organizations that are on the call today possibly had to lay off or furlough workers, or maybe an employee had a spouse that lost their job, and that can be really concerning as well. We know that finances are often a number one stressor for Americans when we're not in a pandemic. So when we're in a pandemic, it's just heightened so much more. And then stress from disrupted routines. This is a big one. As human beings, we're creatures of habit, and we really like those routines. We stick to those routines. And when those are out of our control, it can be very psychologically trying, especially for somebody who has a mental health issue. There's also a lot of concern around the demands for access to food, basic necessities, and childcare. While some of these are improving a bit, I think in the Western New York area, you can now at least get toilet paper. There is still a lot of concern about going to the store, feeling safe going to the store, getting cleaning supplies, having access to food. If somebody in your home lost their job, maybe you're really on a tight budget and not able to access the food that you once were able to. That can be really concerning and put a lot of stress on an employee. And then, of course, social isolation still comes into play. Many workplaces continue to work from home, or you're in a very socially distanced environment in the office. And if you're alone at home, that can be really trying on your mental health to not have social connection. As humans, we're very social creatures. We like to see others, to speak with others, to interact. And if you live with family and you're stuck with family, you just might be missing the opportunity to interact with people outside of your family. As much as we love our family members, it can be a challenge to be around the same people 24/7. So social interactions have certainly taken a bit of a hit in this current pandemic. And then again, I'm going to keep saying this throughout the presentation, but it's so important to remember that everyone's concerns are unique and likely valid. So it's not our right to say what should or shouldn't bother someone, and that's really important when we're talking about mental well-being. A little bit about mental health by the numbers. A lot of initial research is already starting to come out around the pandemic and its negative effects on mental health. In fact, a recent Kaiser Family Foundation poll found that more than half of Americans, 56% in fact, report that there's a lot of worry or stress leading to negative mental health effects around the pandemic. So this could be trouble eating, changes in the appetite, trouble sleeping. I know for me, that's one that I've certainly felt. Maybe drinking more alcohol to cope with what's going on. Headaches or stomach aches, irritability, all of these are negative mental health effects that come from the pandemic. But what we find, if you're an organization out there today dealing with frontline workers, is that they're impacted even more. So about 64% reported worsened mental health in the frontline field. So we really want to make sure we're supporting those employees. And then 65% who've lost income reported these negative health effects as well. So we're talking about well over the majority. And that just means that we really need to put this mental health at the forefront. And then I want to remind everyone, this is only pertaining to the current situation, does not take into account the millions of individuals who already struggled with undiagnosed mental health disorders before the pandemic even began. So there's a lot of issues that still come into play. The next graphic from that same study showed that most Americans across all demographic groups say that their lives have been disrupted by the outbreak. And this could be leading to further anxiety and depression. I think we all can understand that there's a lot or some disruption, but the issue is that for those who struggle with anxiety or depression, they might really be having limited resources or access to seek the support that they need. So I frequently discuss anxiety and depression, especially because those are the two most prevalent health conditions in our society. On the benefits team, we get to sit through clinical reviews with a lot of our groups, and we always see anxiety and depression as some of the most utilized medications and the most common diagnoses. So we know that they are very prevalent across the nation and in Western New York as well. And one way to break down the barrier to getting services is to really reduce stigma. And we hear about this a lot, but now reducing stigma around mental health is more important than ever. And why is that? Well, many employees won't seek treatment or use available resources due to stigma and shame that they might feel. So naming mental health at your organization and how it impacts work will reduce barriers to seeking treatment and support. We want to be really transparent that it's okay to need help for your mental health. I give the example, in my family, I have a brother who deals with some mental health issues, and he had to take some time off of work before this even began. And he had a lot of difficulty within his organization getting the time off that he needed, whereas he had a coworker who had time off she needed for a surgery and to recover. And it's still very much okay and acceptable on the physical health side to need time off. But on the mental health side, there's still a lot of stigma that exists with that. So first and foremost, acknowledge the impact of the situation on mental health. Put it right out there and say that we as an organization know that these are worrying and stressful times, and we want to be here to support you. Try not to sweep mental health under the rug, especially now. And then, as I've said time again, recognize everyone has their own experience. Never assume how someone should feel or what they may be experiencing. That's really one of the key takeaways here today. And then the first step you can take as someone in a leadership role or just as a teammate is to check in with your coworkers. As many employees remain in a state of social distancing, we lose those casual day-to-day interactions that build connection among colleagues. So having a remote or distanced workforce means that we'll see our colleagues much less often, which makes it harder to notice if someone is struggling. Whereas if you were in the office in normal times, you might easily be able to see the signs and symptoms. It's a lot different when you're socially distanced. Therefore, it's really important to try and regularly touch base with your teammates. And the first thing you can do is to create really intentional one-on-one check-ins throughout the work week. Set aside time on your calendar and that individual's calendar for a standing appointment. Otherwise, they may be forgotten, and you may go a week or two and realize, I haven't even heard from so-and-so so much as an email. And that's really what we want to avoid. We should really be knowing what's going on with each employee. What are they working on in terms of their productivity, what they might have on their plate, how you might be able to be helpful. And I've found that those one-on-one check-ins can be very helpful. Be creative too about leveraging technology. Hopefully by this point, we've all gotten really good at using technology, whether it's through Zoom, you can do virtual brainstorming sessions. We use a lot of Microsoft Teams at Walsh Duffield. We have an organizational development manager who's led some fun activities as well, where employees can get involved with their family. So it doesn't always have to be work related. It can just be about building camaraderie and not losing that social connection with your workforce. And then you want to make sure that you're asking questions when you're in those one-on-one meetings, especially. Be intentional about the questions you ask too. You don't want to just ask, how are you? You want to say, how has this transition been? What support would be helpful to you? Really target those questions so that you're not just being very general and you're trying to elicit a good response from the employee. And then be mindful of privacy policies. I think a lot of HR individuals get very worried about privacy policies, which are in place for both physical and mental health. And to be compliant with the ADA, you cannot force someone to discuss a medical or a mental health condition. But instead, you can focus the conversation on how this is impacting work and just be very open and transparent so that individuals feel they can come to you if they have a concern, but you're not trying to force them into admitting something is going on. So I want to pause here and talk briefly about emotional intelligence, or EQ as it's often called, because I think this is a concept that's really important to consider right now. I've personally presented on this topic several times before, and we could easily designate a whole hour to this topic, but here we're going to talk about it as a reminder on how your emotional intelligence can help you through these adverse times. We know emotions and stress are really high, and sometimes this is when we see many people's true colors show. However, there are many moving parts to why someone reacts emotionally under stress, and EQ can be a great tool to help. So I want you to refer back to this concept in the coming weeks as a tool to think about your own communication style and how you interact with others. So here we're talking about self-awareness, and self-awareness is really the first step when it comes to emotional intelligence. This is assessing your own strengths and weaknesses and knowing how your moods impose triggers, or you might be triggered to overreact or to act irritably. If we don't have self-awareness, it's really hard to build on these other traits in the emotional intelligence model. Another key part is motivation. So motivation is facing challenges head on. Work one step at a time, take time to really reassess when you reach a milestone, to really celebrate too. I think it can become very easy when we're working remotely or distanced to maybe not reach out and give people props for a job well done. You're not seeing them, so you're maybe not thinking of it, but we really want to thank and reach out to others for a job well done. And then of course, empathy plays a huge role, as you can imagine, in this current environment. And if you're in a leadership role, you have a responsibility to try to be empathetic, to be aware of the moods and viewpoints of others. This goes hand in hand with that aspect of not assuming what others should be feeling. You want to practice acts of kindness or generosity on purpose. You want to be reliable, and you want to be slow to judge, to really look at the facts of what's going on with each employee, and to not judge and think, well, so-and-so, is really anxious about going out or coming back to work, and being very judgmental. We want to be very open-minded. We also want to practice our social skills when it comes to emotional intelligence. You want to reach out to others. So this goes back to the check-ins. You want to listen well. You want to work to diffuse disputes. You want to be able to have people know they can come to you and you're a trustworthy person. And then when it comes to self-regulation, the next trait, you want to learn ways to be calm, self-calming techniques, self-care techniques. And I'm going to talk about that in an entire section because self-care is really important right now. And self-care is one of the most powerful tools you can use to help yourself cope during these times, because you're only human as well, and you need your own coping strategies in this time. So let's remember emotional intelligence as we go through the rest of the slides. As Sarah said, these slides will be shared, and I think that's a great graphic to have available to constantly refer back to. So employees look to leaders, we know, to model appropriate behavior in the workplace. So if managers and leaders are not visibly making mentally healthy choices, employees will be more likely to do the same. So I want to emphasize here 4 steps that you can take as a leader to really help your employees and your teams. So the first is to emphasize support resources, lead by example, respond supportively, and be very transparent. I'm going to break those each down on the next few slides. So we know that the uncertainty and disruption of daily routine caused by the pandemic is likely to exacerbate existing mental health challenges and cause additional stress for all employees. So an employee who normally seems very unfazed by crises might feel differently in this moment, or somebody who's always had an underlying issue with depression might find themselves really kind of stuck in a dark place. So during this time, many employees will also be focused on just the health of themselves. They might really feel as though they're in survival mode. So we want to do whatever we can to help them get to a state where they're feeling confident and comfortable getting their work done, because ultimately we want to help them be productive. So the first thing is to share your current resources. Remind employees about the company's mental health resources available and send that through multiple channels. So it could be email. Maybe if you have a smaller workforce, you can actually mail a postcard home as a reminder. Make them easy to find. Don't make employees have to go look for these resources. It's also really important now to add additional support for managers. What you want to do is, a manager is often that first defense or first line that the employee is going to for help. You don't want the managers or team leaders to feel as though they can't handle a situation, they don't know where to turn, and they just always defer to HR. A team leader or a manager can be a really powerful tool. So you want to make sure that those individuals can respond to stress and mental health issues and know what resources are available. And now might be the time where you find your resources are lacking and you need to adopt new resources. So it's important to figure out, do you have any holes in what you have available? Can you offer more benefits and supports to employees? So what are these support resources? There are quite a few. The first, I think that's really powerful at this time, is your EAP. So consider adopting one if you don't currently have one in place. Walsh Duffield can help you do that if you don't have an EAP provider. An EAP is great because it provides confidential resources. And just like we would with physical health, we want to be really mindful about making sure all these issues stay confidential. And EAP is a great third party to do that. We are fortunate at Walsh Duffield to partner with a really great EAP through Child and Family Services, and have really tapped into them and used them because I myself am not a social worker. I don't have every answer in terms of what to do. So we really want to turn to the experts in that area. You can promote resources then at an individual level. Maybe there are telephonic resources for employees who are struggling. Maybe there are group-based resources. We did a presentation through our EAP around sleep health because we know that sleep is a really big issue right now. So there are multiple channels that you can share this information. And then there are local and community resources, which are truly invaluable right now. I sit on the Mental Health Advocates Board, and they are continuing to provide and promote a variety of resources, such as virtual support groups. And it's interesting, they've said that a lot of these have even been more popular virtually than they were before the pandemic, because people can do this so conveniently, they can still get support. And as many of you might know, an issue that also comes up now under the lines of mental health issues is substance abuse. Unfortunately, many are really struggling with substance abuse. And if they're not getting their regular support groups, or maybe there's a sponsor that they have that's not as accessible, that can really make it easy for an employee or someone in their family to slip back into old habits. Or we saw that one of the negative health effects of dealing with the pandemic is to turn to alcohol or to turn to drugs to cope. And on the side of the benefits, we do always see, just like anxiety and depression, we see substance abuse as something that's utilized for services or for prescription drugs. We really want to make sure that we're not overlooking substance abuse as a key issue here as well. So the local community resources can provide great support there, and I'll share some of those at the end. Telemedicine and healthcare benefits are also critical. I think it's fantastic how we've seen that telemedicine for mental health services have skyrocketed over these past few months. And people really enjoy, I think, the confidentiality and convenience of speaking to a mental health professional over the phone, over Skype or FaceTime. And many of the plans are still offering these support services for a $0 copay. So it's making it affordable to get treatment and help. It's making it easy and accessible, and helping to break down that stigma as well. So I hope that these telemedicine mental health benefits will only continue to grow in the upcoming months and years, because people are really enjoying the support that it provides. And unfortunately, in the Western New York area, I think we still find that it takes a long time to get in to see someone for mental health support. And that can be a problem. We can't have an employee or a family member who is really struggling with anxiety and depression be suffering for months and months because they can't get in to see someone. So that's where these telemedicine benefits can be very beneficial. And then of course there's internal support. So this could be through your HR team, through your wellness team and committee. We want to show that there's strong support of mental health. It's okay to talk about. And even though we're in a crisis, this is something we always want to have on our radar. So the internal support is just as important as well. The next thing we want to do as leaders is, of course, to lead by example. There's no doubt that leadership will be one of the most tested skills throughout the coronavirus pandemic, because we're leading in a very different way. And it's interesting because research shows that EQ, our emotional intelligence, accounts for nearly 90% of what sets a high performer apart from others with similar skills. So you have two individuals, they have very similar resumes, but one has high emotional intelligence and one has low emotional intelligence. We find that those with high emotional intelligence perform much better overall as leaders. So when this pandemic is over, employees will definitely remember how their organization reacted and how it treated its employees in this time of crisis. So leading by example is critical, and it's one way you can ensure that you have a supportive culture. So you can do this by first being open and honest about the challenges you're experiencing. It's not that you have to share every deep, dark secret that you have, but I think when leaders and managers are open about struggles they might have with mental health or just stress and worry, it makes it okay for others to talk about and share. And then share how you're managing your mental health. So talk about some of the ways you found success. Practice and commit to healthy working norms too. So it can be very hard if you have a lot of individuals still working from home to have a lot of blurred boundaries and people who may be working a lot of extra hours because work is always present and available. So you want to set what are healthy working norms and boundaries to establish that people do have time away from their work and their tasks to do things for themselves. And then again, just normalize the challenges that come with virtual working and distanced working. Continue communicating that it always will take time to adjust, and we're here to be open, to be flexible, and to talk about what you may need to be the most productive at work. The next thing is to really respond supportively. So social isolation, economic uncertainty, these can all worsen the symptoms of mental health challenges. They just exacerbate maybe the symptoms an individual is feeling. And managers may find themselves in a conversation, frankly, about mental health, and they might not feel prepared. So it's important to respond appropriately and with compassion, rather than immediately saying, oh, you sound like you're struggling, I'm gonna ship you off to HR. It's important for those managers and leaders to be equipped to deal with those mental health issues as sort of that first responder. So the first tip is to really be present and listen attentively and actively. We are having that one-on-one check-in with an individual. We want to make sure that we're not trying to diagnose colleagues. We're not mental health experts, and that's not what I'm saying we want to be doing. We don't want to be assuming what someone needs either, but we want to really listen to what is the employee saying to me, what are they struggling with, and how can I help? And then you want to reassure that employee. More than likely, that employee you're speaking with is hopefully a performer that you want to keep at your organization. So you want to reassure them that they're valuable to the company. In their own mind, they might be thinking, I'm really struggling here and I might lose my job. And they might be spiraling, and all they need is a little reassurance from you that we're here to support you. We think you're a great performer and we want to help you do your best. And then you want to follow through. So if you find that an employee needs assistance, you want to really make sure that you follow through. You want to respond in a way that says, I want to make sure I can support you. Can we check in regularly and see how you're progressing on these tasks, or if you're able to utilize these resources? You want to really make sure that you follow through. Again, not just shipping them off to, here's the EAP site, or here's the flyer on telemedicine. You want to make sure that you're responding with follow-up questions. And then work together. In a case where an employee does disclose a mental health condition to you, as a manager, tell the employee that you'll notify HR with their consent and that you'll work together with the HR team and employee on a plan forward. You want to be working together, and then you want to really express gratitude and appreciation for that employee. It takes a lot of bravery and courage to admit that you're struggling with your mental health. So we want to commend an employee who had the courage to come to someone in leadership and express that they need help, because that takes a lot of bravery and courage. And then be transparent. I think this is really important now more than ever. I think employees always want transparency within their organization, but we know that they're sometimes left in the dark and wondering about what's going on within the organization. I have a lot of anxiety. I'm very worried about what's going on. I think the great example here about being transparent is on the return to work process is a great example. And we at WD have had a committee working on this for the last several weeks. So if we're thinking about return to work, this is a great example of how to be transparent. What you want to do is keep employees up to date. You really want to let them know about anything that they need to know in terms of policies, in terms of procedures, how it impacts them, any work-related changes in their shifts or client demands, team distribution, or policies. It's funny how employees really do appreciate knowing what are the cleaning procedures that are going to be in place before I come back to work, and what am I to expect when I come back in the door. So we've done a lot of that at Walsh Duffield, making different channels of communication through video, through PowerPoint, through voiceover, letting employees see what is the office going to look like when you come back, what are the expectations, and this makes people feel a lot better. And I know firsthand from a family member who did not get any of this from her employer, she had a ton of anxiety about going back to work because there was nothing said to her about how are things going to be cleaned? Will everybody be asked to wear a mask? Will I be socially distanced from my coworkers? So if you don't share those things with employees, they're going to assume that those things haven't been addressed. And by communicating that, you're giving them a lot of reassurance that we're taking your safety and health very seriously. So it's important to communicate those things as a team to your employees. And then clarify expectations. I think many of us have already gone through this process when we transitioned to working at home, but maybe now we're transitioning back into the workplace. And what are the expectations? What are the work hours? If you have employees working from home still, maybe you have an employee you know works too many hours or stays logged in too long, and maybe you just need to clarify to them that they don't need to respond to any emails after 6 p.m. Or maybe you have an employee with small children at home and they have a really hard time in the morning, and you can say to them, well, I know that you have those hours that you need to devote to your kids. We expect that you still work your 40 hours, but you're able to do so at times that work for you. So that's just an example. It all varies depending on the workforce that you have, but that's just a way of showing that you can be flexible. And when you're flexible with employees, they'll in turn provide flexibility back to you. Now I want to shift to self-care, because taking care of yourself is so important right now. We can't take care of others unless we take care of ourselves. And I think we've all seen posts or videos of leaders in organizations, or even within our own organization, who maybe just look exhausted and burned out. But any leader is still human. We can't care for ourselves without being healthy. Leaders have to be good at this. They have to be good at self-care. That means at a basic level, take time each day to do something that brings you happiness or joy. Additionally, try to recognize your own symptoms and signs of too much stress. This is very unique to each individual. From there, ask yourself, what is your fuel? So how do you refill your own tank? When your tank is empty and you're feeling anxious and worried and overly stressed, how do you bring yourself back to calm and to that steady, normal state? You need to know what works for you. And then be an advocate for self-care. So by practicing self-care within your own means, you're able to then speak to it to your employees and how valuable it's been to you. So let's talk about the self-care part as a lot of my favorite strategies. So let's talk about what this could mean. And the first thing is to really think about labeling emotions. Right now, we're probably all feeling a lot of emotions, but it's important to name the emotions you feel, because it causes you to confront them head on. So instead of sweeping your emotions under the rug or ignoring them or bottling up, which we know can lead to problems down the line, it's very important to label them, because it causes you to confront them head on. And in doing my research for this presentation and on this topic, I came across an interesting article that talked about how the current environment has caused a lot of these feelings of loss and grief. There's a lot of information on grief, which you think, okay, well, what does that really mean? And these symptoms are sometimes really difficult to articulate, but they're very common right now. So, for example, there's a term that's called anticipatory grief, which includes concerns about what the future holds when we're surrounded by uncertainty. I think we can all relate to this a lot. There's so much uncertainty right now that you might be feeling grief about what's going to happen in the future, and that can cause a lot of undue stress. And then there's another concept around ambiguous loss, which involves the emotions around the loss of dreams, imagined futures, a sense of feeling safe and stable. So many of us might have children that were high school or college seniors, and they had dreams about prom, or they had dreams about graduation, and things change and they had no control over it. That can cause this sense of loss. So it's important to name these emotions. It's more than just, I'm sad, I'm stressed. It's really reaching out and expanding your vocabulary of emotions. And then there's a sense of feeling that we've lost safety and stability. And if we think about basic human needs, safety and stability are really at the base. They're the foundation of our health. So if we lose that sense of security, that sense of stability, it really can rock us to the core. And it's important then to really recognize that you're in the state of maybe chaos, or you're in crisis, and now is the time where you need to stop and address that. So a great practice here is to try spending 60 seconds every day writing down what you think and feel before you start your day, your work day or your day. And then again at the end of the day. So are you feeling fearful? Are you feeling worried or angry or irritable? Write those words down, and at least 2 prevailing thoughts running through your mind. So maybe the prevailing thought is, I just cannot be productive. I feel like I'm going to lose my job. You don't have to solve these or work on them for now, but just know where you are. Just start writing them down and becoming aware of what are the thoughts that are prevailing in my mind and what are the emotions I'm feeling. And then from there, you really want to get into your body. So you want to identify where you feel tension. And we can try this here and now in the present moment. I think it's always a nice little pause and break to identify where you feel tension in your physical body. This is a grounding exercise getting us into where we are in the present moment. So we're going to do a quick little body scan, breathe, and repeat. So sit wherever you may be into your chair comfortably. And you just want to feel your legs and your glutes grounding into the chair, the floor, wherever you might be. And just be in this present moment. And I want everybody to take a nice deep breath in through their nose here and out through their mouth. And give me one more nice and deep in through the nose and out through the mouth. And I'm going to have everybody keep breathing on your own pace here. And now do a quick body scan from head to toe. And as you scan from the head all the way down the body, try to notice any areas where you're feeling tension. This will be different for everyone. Maybe you feel tension in your jaw and your teeth are clenched. Maybe you feel tension in your shoulders and they're constantly shrugging up. Or maybe you're hunched forward and your back is hurting. Or your abdominal muscles are tightened up, which can lead to stomach aches and pains. Or maybe your glutes or your legs are tightening up because you're feeling tense. Or your calves, or even into your feet or your hands. Sometimes we clench there. And as you feel any of those areas of tension, just take a nice deep breath. And as you inhale, feel that area of tension. And as you exhale, feel that area just relax a little bit. And as you breathe in, feeling a little bit of tension. And as you exhale, feeling the relaxation. So this is a really great activity to bring you into the here and now, to try to focus on your body and what your body is telling you about stress, because our physical body will tell us a lot about how our mind is feeling. And then for many of us, we're still working at home, which sometimes has its perks, but there are also pitfalls. So for many, the blurred boundaries between work and home life can be really challenging. So encourage those working from home to do some of the following and maybe try it yourself. The first tip is around morning magic, as it's called. So set a goal to tackle trickier tasks in the morning when your energy and productivity are higher. Or maybe you're an individual who thrives more in the afternoon. Try to save those big projects for that time where you're feeling at your most productive and your most creative. And then keep hydrated too. So I know when we left the office and I started working at home, I noticed I was drinking a lot less water because I wasn't refilling my reusable water bottle. So I started doing the same at home to make sure I was drinking the same water I used to at work. But I also noticed that I started drinking a lot more coffee. And this can be a problem because too much caffeine can lead to increased anxiety and increased jitters. It can, if you drink it too late, can disrupt your sleep in the evening. We want to make sure that we're not over caffeinating ourselves because it can really lead into more jitters, less sleep, which we don't need at this time. We also want to make sure that we're moving throughout the day. So set a reminder. Sometimes when we're working at home, we work for hours and don't even realize we haven't gotten up from our desk. So take a break, go for a quick walk. Just set that reminder to move. We know as well, if you're able to exercise or get a little bit more physically active, that can do great things for lowering stress levels. And regular exercise can even help you to sleep better and to lower rates of depression. So any way that you like to move is great. Become task-oriented as well by making a daily checklist of what you need to accomplish. Try to avoid multitasking whenever possible. If you're working on a big project, maybe it's shutting down your email and your chats so that you can really focus on what's in front of you. Turn it up as well. So playing music, especially without lyrics, background music can help maintain your focus while working if maybe you have a lot of distractions around the house. Take a break as well. So if you're working at home, take a break for lunch, call a coworker, stretch. And then it's important to try to end your workday. Don't keep logging back in or checking emails on your phone. This doesn't lead to healthy work-life boundaries. And all of this applies when we're not in crisis. These are just important tips to follow. And if you are working back at the office, these are also really relevant because we're likely socially distancing. We're not having our normal social interactions. Maybe we're not able to eat in our cafeteria and we have to stay at our desk all day. So it can feel a little bit more tedious. And these are great tips to help to just get you out of any funk that you might have from this current environment. And then next, we want to adopt a growth mindset. This really refers to positive psychology and how it can be a great tool to get you through difficult times, just like emotional intelligence. So the first step is to challenge your thoughts, change your internal dialogue. Our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are very intricately connected. So changing our thoughts to be more helpful will have a huge impact on the intensity of the emotions we're feeling and actually help us be more productive. This sets off a chain of events by doing this regularly that leads to more positive thinking and can actually change our neurochemistry, which leads to that growth mindset. We next want to focus on the 3 Ps. The 3 Ps, first is permanent, and this is the concept that you're feeling like this is going to last forever. This current pandemic is never going to end. It might very much feel that way, but we know that at some point it will end, and you have to remind yourself that this current situation is not a permanent one. The next is the sense of pervasiveness. It's the idea that something is invading every aspect of your life. And you think back to that graphic before, some or all people are saying that it has disrupted their life. But you might stop here and find that, okay, it's disrupted a lot of my life, but what are some things I've been able to do or enjoy at this time that I wouldn't have been able to otherwise? And then the third P is personal. Many will think, I'm not coping well with what's going on. I'm really kind of losing my grasp. I'm losing my productivity. I'm suffering in all aspects. But again, we want to stop and challenge this thought. Remember that at this time, we're all collectively in this pandemic. We're all going through this together. We've never gone through this before. So it's very important to give yourself a little bit of grace and to understand that we're all struggling in some capacity. And it's not personal just to you. And these all help to develop a growth mindset. And the growth mindset is really this concept of somebody who's positive. They're kind of that glass half full person, but it goes much more beyond that. And having a growth mindset is something you can actually learn. So even if by default you tend to be more of a glass half empty individual, you can practice the challenging thoughts and the 3 Ps on a regular basis to develop this growth mindset, this positive outlook, somebody who sees challenges as opportunities, somebody who really likes to thrive in times of crisis and can see that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So adopting a growth mindset is critical. And then I want to talk briefly about mindfulness here. So mindfulness is a hot topic all the time, but especially now when stress and emotions are high. So some ways to create small moments of mindfulness are to establish some transition routines. This especially works when working from home. If you're working from home occasionally or all the time still, you've probably gained back the time from your morning commute or your end of day commute. So take that time as a transition routine. You now have 20 minutes. Do something for yourself or go for a walk with the dog, drink a cup of coffee with your spouse. Give yourself that time. It doesn't mean just because you have that extra 30 minutes that now you're putting in, an extra hour of work every day. Really give yourself that time back whenever you can. And then try to do one mindful activity every day. You don't have to be mindful or present 24/7. I'm sure that's almost impossible, but you want to incorporate an activity every day. So with intention, mindful intention, try to do something like wash the dishes or water the flowers, play with your kids, read a book. Just be focused for a few minutes in the here and now and try to just let those invading thoughts flow right past. And then try some stretching. So this can be a great way to break up your workday, whether you are at home, you're in the office. It's very good to practice that breathing, body scanning, and then repeat. And you can also, along with the breathing, when you feel areas of tension, whether it's in your neck or shoulders, whether it's in your hips, is to stop and actually stretch those areas too. That, along with the breathing, will really help to alleviate areas where you're feeling stress. Then you can also try the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise, which I keep seeing all over now, and it is really kind of a neat exercise. It's, again, a grounding exercise to bring you into the present moment. So when you're stressed, you feel your heart rate is high, my blood pressure is high, I'm really in the thick of it. Try this exercise. And what you're going to do is think of 5 things you can see. So if you stop right now, just look around you and scan. There are 5 things you can easily see around you. I have flowers on my table. I have the window, the clouds, flowers outside, the carpet on the floor. It can be very simple. 4 things that you can touch. So it could be your skin, it could be the coolness of the laptop, whatever it might be, something that you can touch. 3 things that you can hear. I can hear my dog snoring. Hopefully you can't hear him snoring. 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. So again, this brings you into that present moment. And then finally, we talk a lot at Walsh about gratitude, but I think gratitude is a really important part of well-being. Ask yourself what you're grateful for today. So I'm going to stop here really quick and let everybody, if you so choose, to put something in the chat box. So not the Q&A, but just here, think about something that you might be grateful for. As I talked about, we might feel that this is a really pervasive time and that it's invading everything. But if we stop and think about this current pandemic, there's probably something really beneficial that's come out of it. And what might that be? So maybe you've had more time at home and you're able to foster a dog. I've seen so many great stories about people being able to foster pets because they're at home more often. Maybe it's spending time with your family. I see people sending in some good responses here. So spending time with family, you're home with them, although sometimes you might be really frustrated with them. You think, wow, I'm gaining some time that I never would have had with them before. Maybe it is learning to be more present, watching your small children grow. I know I have small children, and I'm getting extra time with them. I'm getting to see them do new things, planting flowers, getting out in the garden. For me, I don't know if it's a joyous thing, but I think it's great that I have some more time at home to start working on some home projects. I think a lot of other people are feeling the same way. You've gained this time. So not everything is prevailing and negative. People are talking about enjoying the weather. I think the weather is huge. You imagine back a few months ago when we were in the thick of this, it was still snowing. And that made it a little bit more challenging to really be have a positive outlook. But when you're seeing sunshine out your window, it certainly helps to have a little bit more gratitude. So those are great, and I appreciate everyone for sharing. But doing a little gratitude exercise, even with your team, can be a great way to build a growth mindset, to hear from others about what are they doing that's making them happy right now, because we all have to find ways to bring joy in our lives in times of crisis. So thank you, everybody, for your participation. I'm getting to the end here, so I want to just summarize what we talked about. Mental health is a great concern. It was before the pandemic. I think what we're seeing now is it's even more of concern. If you have individuals suffering with anxiety and depression, they might be feeling it even more so now. If you have individuals who live at home alone, they might be feeling very isolated. We just want to be aware of that, and we don't want to assume how anyone should be feeling. We just want to be open and listen actively to what our employees need. We learned how to positively address the needs of employees by responding supportively, listening actively, providing those resources, and then hopefully you took away some good self-care and resilience tips that you can practice. And if you get good at practicing them, then you can certainly share them with your staff as well. So from here, I just want to provide a couple of notes about my contact information. So if you find that you're really looking to build this more into your culture, to really address the needs of your workplace and make sure that you're supporting mental health, you can always reach out to any of us on the wellness team. If you need more information or resources, we're always happy to help. And then from here, there are some great support resources I found along the way. The one is through Erie MHA, which is the board I sit on. They have a community resource guide that talks about all sorts of resources available for mental health and substance abuse. There's a site called helpguide.org, and the workplace mental health site has fantastic resources for employees and employers on mental health and well-being. And then finally, Headspace, and Headspace is a very cool meditation site and app. They've provided some free ones to New York State, which is fantastic, giving you those voiceovers to listen to meditate, to really get you into that mindset of meditation. So from here, I think we might have a couple of questions, so we can turn it over to the Q&A part.
Thanks, Marie. We do actually have a couple of questions. The first one is, how can I know if any employees working at home are struggling with their mental health, or if they're just struggling to get work done due to lack of accountability?
So I think at this time, we want to be really flexible. We want to be really open-minded, and we don't want to assume or judge anything. I think by nature, sometimes we assume the negative thoughts or the worst, that, oh, this employee is just being lazy, or, you know, they don't have anyone to report to right now, so they're struggling. So I think it's important to just stop and really think about that, and think about, how can I have a one-on-one check-in with this individual? By having regular check-ins with them and asking those questions, I think you can really get to the bottom of, are they struggling with something at home? Are there some support resources we can offer? Maybe they're just struggling with accountability, and you need to have more regular check-ins with them to find out, what are they working on? So I think that really staying in communication and connected is critical. Otherwise, I know it can be very easy to let employees fall behind and not hear from them for days and days on end, which can be a problem.
Thanks. So we also have, what are some signs and symptoms to look for in employees who may be struggling with their mental health?
So I think this is really critical to know all the time. It's a little bit trickier when you're maybe not seeing employees as regularly, but anytime there's a change in the individual's work habits, you might be thinking there could be something related to a struggle with stress or anxiety. Changes in appearance. So I think those one-on-one check-ins are great when they're scheduled, and you can use something like a Teams chat to see the employee. We don't need to bombard employees with video conferencing. I think that can overload them and stress them out. But I think it is important to at least see them somewhat regularly, so you can see if anything seems off. Maybe they look really tired. It's important to kind of check in on their demeanor. Of course, if they're out sick more often without really any reason behind it, if they have a lot of mood swings, or they're irritable, if they seem withdrawn when normally they're pretty social, or if they're just avoiding interaction, maybe they're not wanting to participate in anything socially, however you might be offering that. I think those are all really important signs, whether you're at the office or working from home.
So this last question is a good segue, and it's, how can I support my employees both at work and at home without intruding on their privacy?
That's a good one. So I think it's always important to try to stick to questions around work. So we talked about, how has this transition been? What could we provide to support you? You never want to ask a question straight out, are you depressed, or pry into trying to diagnose them with a condition. You really want to keep it open-ended and focused on how you can help them get their work done. But I think sharing those resources I talked about, those resource guides in multiple channels, can be the most helpful, because it's sometimes really hard to know if, does my employee have a child at home who's dealing with substance abuse, and it's taking away a lot of time that they would be working because they're worried about substance abuse issues with their child. So however you can share those resources, I don't think that you can overshare at this time. That can be super beneficial. So I'm going to make sure that, you know, as a follow-up, that all of those are shared with everyone, so that you have those to send out to employees.
Great. Thanks, Marie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca and Marie. Thank you for sharing your insight and expertise on such an important topic, especially during these times. I also want to thank all of you for joining today's webinar, and we hope you enjoyed this presentation, which is the last of our June educational webinar series. Please stay tuned for more information on any upcoming webinars, and if you have any additional questions or you'd like to connect directly with the Welsh Duffield team, feel free to reach out directly using the contact information on this slide. We're available to help with any of your employee benefits, well-being, or insurance needs, and we'd be happy to speak with you further. So thank you again for joining us today, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. Have a great day.